At the end of the understandable world, there is a region squatting beneath an ever-shifting moon that defies the logic of any land you hail from or have ever before seen. Here, you will find a sea of red flowers hiding a malevolent world deep beneath its surface, a half-real realm entirely painted from the people to the plains, a city that needs your attention purely to exist, and if you're really unlucky, you may even encounter the hated apocalypse wasps, the one creature all other dwellers of this land hate collectively. There are plenty of strange people and places to discover in this dubiously mapped region known as the Moonlands, and we'll be covering all of them. If you're interested in discovering these places along with extra tables, names, and details that I won't cover so that my ass doesn't get C&D'd, they can all be found in the Gackling Moon book by Patrick Stuart and Tom K. Kemp, with added pieces from Scrap Princess, Kiana, and Emil Frankel. This is going to be an anomalous journey that may leave you changed permanently, as we delve into a world full of illogical reason, abstract concepts, and a bunch of weird little guys. The Moonlands are as incredibly intertwined as they are insane. For all the parts that may not make sense to the average tourist, the logistics of the world slot in together from cultural relationships, essential trading routes, and a shared history fairly well. Because of this, it's kind of a difficult realm to talk about because trying to explain any insane aspect means having to break down another insane aspect just to provide context. So let's begin with the one feature that affects all the beings that habitate this realm, the Gackling Moon. If you come to the Moonlands or live here already, knowing the different moon phases and what they do is absolutely imperative to not only thriving here, but surviving. Orbiting above is a half-shattered and maddened moon lording over the lands below, changing reality for those unlucky enough to be caught in its light or stupid enough to gaze back into it. There are 8 phases of the moon that all have different effects upon the land. However, there are 3 rules you need to know about the moon if you'd like to stay alive. 1. The magical effects of the moon count only in direct moonlight. Clouds can obscure the moon, but you're taking a gamble. 2. Moon effects last only as long as moonlight shines directly upon the affected being. However, there are exceptions to be wary of. And 3. Moon effects only work at night. They end at dawn, even if the moon is still visible during the day. The first and most powerful phase is the fine Gackling Moon. While not being the scariest of the phases, this one can and will cause chaos. Anyone looking into the moon itself will go mad and forget who they are as long as the moon shines down on them. Also, the fine Gackling Moon grants monkey paw-like wishes to everybody once in their lifetime. However, to make the wish, you have to look directly into the moonlight, causing complete amnesia. Anyone caught in direct moonlight can transform with nothing more than a thought. Women may change into animals, men may change into stones, murderers into weapons, animals may change into humans, as well as a few other weird transformations. The second phase is the Painted Moon. This one is not overall dangerous, but can cause many problems and awkward hijinks. It's a gorgeous, glimmering moon that causes images to dance and fly around. For those who sleep under this moon, they can swap dreams with somebody nearby as well as have their dreams visible around them. These dreams can be powerful enough if manifested from horrid nightmares or from strong emotional dreams to be an actual problem for the reality around the dreamer. More terrifyingly, magic users who sleep under this moon with memorized spells will have those spells manifest in reality that are fully independent from the magic user, with their own personalities and intentions shaped by the nature of the spell. Waking the magic user will end these effects, however that may be easier said than done when dealing with a malevolent fireball or curse spell blocking you from getting to their dormant caster. Overall, this moon mostly causes dangers with people perhaps getting jealous of their partner dreaming about someone else, or secrets manifesting in stress dreams, and is very easy to avoid by simply not sleeping underneath its glimmering rays. The third phase is the Sorrowing Moon. Once again, not a dangerous phase, but one that truly sucks deeply. All colors are muted, even the moonlight changes from silver to gray. This phase can be an incredibly unfortunate one to find yourself under if you are already suffering loss, suffering from depression, or any other number of problems that have you down, as the light makes sorrow truly potent and can place you in a state of permanent gloom. It is impossible to laugh or joke under this moon's light. Once you start crying, it can be impossible to stop. Perhaps saddest of all, this moonlight gives animals the ability to speak and have a modicum of intelligence. However, the animals are struck with a deep sadness towards the cruelty of nature and their own brief awareness of it, and can mostly be found crying themselves to sleep. What the fuck, man? The fourth phase is the Ruinous Moon, and this is a tricky one and extremely dangerous for some, but not others. The Ruinous Moon casts a bright, silvery blue light and causes shadows to be dark, depthless pools. Under this moon, the ghosts of those slain by mortal hands seek out their killers. Depending on how robust the emotions and personality of the victim are, it may just follow their killer around and accuse them of killing them, or it may be powerful enough to enact revenge themselves. Shadows also can rebel and leave the one who cast them to join the Parliament of Shadows, a strange organization that, if found, is rumored to be able to lift curses, fix past wrongs, or deliver knowledge. Criminals, murderers, soldiers, and especially those who have killed magic users avoid this moon like the plague for fear of their past actions catching up to them. The fifth and favorite phase of the people here is the new moon. There are absolutely no magical effects, and people everywhere can walk beneath it without fear of reprisal or consequences. Night markets pop up, late shows and festivities as well as raucous celebrations can be found aplenty for everybody who wants to enjoy this time while they can, before the worst moon of all rears its ugly head. And that moon is our sixth one, the horrid Red Wasp Moon. A moon that bathes reality in a crimson hell that only the truest and worst villains would ever willingly walk under. It's considered culturally acceptable to break any oath, pact, plans, or appointment that would cause anybody to have to walk underneath this malevolent lunar light. I'm going to list out the powers here in Stuart's own words, as I will not be able to do justice to the visceral writing here. I will be quoting this book a lot throughout, and you will know by the quote and page number that comes on screen, because one of the best aspects of this book is just the fantastical, hilarious, and horrific writing throughout. Powers. 1. Meat rots in the red light and births red flies which swarm in the night. 2. Hatred breathes out like a caustic gas which cuts like a knife. 3. Bad thoughts squirm like red eggs under the skin, then burst like buboes, releasing the poisonous red wasps of wrath. These wasps buzz with a high-pitched keening sound like blades on glass. They are aggressive, and their sting is painful to the point of being disabling. The pain only dies with dawn. 4. Those who swear an oath of vengeance to this moon grow buzzing wasp wings which burst from wounds in their back and carry them towards the object of their hate at incredible speed. The seventh, and probably my favorite phase, is of course, the Goblin Moon. The Goblin Moon dunks the world in crazy, vivid green like an 80s nerd swirlied on St. Patrick's Day.
What? Jesus Christ! This is crazy.
This is a mischievous and wild moon. Faces look like carnival masks, people can't stop themselves from hopping and skipping whenever they move, and it is by far the most irritating night for humorless and grave people. Lies are always believed, locks don't work, anybody stronger cannot restrain those weaker than them. Hiding in the shadows is easy if someone is specifically looking for you, and if you laugh, you may not be able to stop to the point of potentially laughing to death. This is a night for thieves and miscreants, as goblins are far more into mischief and mayhem than they are straight up murder. There are strict curfews that are enforced by moon cops who tend to be mostly useless. Rich houses often have secondary doors built further in outside of the moonlight's grasp so that they can actually be locked. And children often stay up, since they are usually weaker than goblins, they can't be restrained and work as great alarm systems for warning the others of goblinish shenanigans. And the eighth and final moon is the Forgotten Moon. The night of this moon hums with an almost static-like energy. Shadows are flickering blue and moths fill the air. Gigantic moths can also be seen high up above, almost like they are circling the moon itself. Any secret whispered under the moonlight will be heard by a moth who will deliver the secret to the ear of another. Sacrificing an owl underneath this moon will cause one of the gigantic moths to swoop down and fast travel you to a place you've been before of your choosing. Rumors also claim that these gigantic moths have at times relayed ancient secrets in exchange for a single drop of blood. This is a moon often used for contracts and bonds, as lies, betrayals, and underhand motives are far too easily discovered. While not dangerous, you always have to be careful for fear of what others might learn or what unwanted secrets you may learn against your will. This covers the 8 phases. To keep things simple, I left out some of the details of how some of the cultures and factions operate under this moon. On the game master side of things, each moon also has a list of potential encounters and events that could be happening under this moon to spark creativity for either random encounters or adventure hooks. For many of these moons, it is best to avoid being in their light, but that can be hard to do when you're on the adventuring path or when dealing with time-sensitive jobs or even tasks that require the moons that characters would so love to avoid. I think there is plenty of potential for both drama and complications, but now that that you have a good understanding of this feature that affects everybody in the Moonlands, it's time to talk about the other one. This feature can be dangerous, often to themselves as well as others, both from their insanity, creativity, and they can be found in pretty much every crack and crevice across the Moonlands. And that feature is the Goblins. Goblins are an infestation in this world and are a huge nuisance to most and can be found pretty much anywhere you go. These are more goofy and mischievous ones and less, Goblin Slayer goblins. However, they are still dangerous and can act like classic ones you'll find in fantasy, but the main danger for them is what insane inventions they make with zero regards for safety or what crazy plans they get in their head. These are the type of goblins who will steal all your livestock to try out their newly built catapult, or build engines for penny farthings to race in more than play the part of the bland bandit stopping you on the road for a pack of cigs. Though they will absolutely do that too. The origin of the goblins can be traced back to when they piloted dangerous, loud, and cramped copper submarines from the red world below the Vermillion Sea and haven't left the Moonlands since. Whenever any goblins are asked about where they came from, whether it be the red world beneath the surface or a different planet or somewhere else entirely, all the goblins will say is that they came goblin-wise. Though to be honest, for most people, it doesn't really matter where they came from. All that matters now is having to deal with them on a regular basis, and especially during the Goblin Moon. We'll cover goblins further when I go location to location and how they show up in those places, but right now we need to talk about the large goblin collider that resides on the Yellow Plains. This is really where things can slide into the too silly throughout this book. I think in general it keeps a great balance of morbidity and humor to create something unique, and if you're running this, there's a lot of room to make up your own content or omit stuff that you don't like. With that said, I know a lot of people who don't have much interest in overly silly content in their RPGs. While there are far more absurd areas we're going to cover, I do think this is the silliest the book gets. Essentially, the large Goblin Collider is a huge cube that is the goblin center of the universe. On the Yellow Plains where it resides, there are dimensional rifts where goblins, their inventions, and whatever else you can think of can come through from across the cosmos. Goblins from all times, dimensions, and worlds come here to bring their goblin experiments, philosophies, and ideas, and are excited to either experiment on other goblins or be experimented on themselves, or both. In this large cube, you can find answers to any goblin problem, plans for all goblin conflicts across the multiverse, and so much more information. The problem usually being that these plans and answers can be absolutely incomprehensible or incredibly hard to find in this carnival madhouse of a building. Getting in isn't too hard. The cube is huge, tiled with cracked glass and ceramic in an off-kilter modernist style. At night, it crackles from within, the mosaic of its windows lit up with bright flashes of green-white goblin galvanizing energy. The only legal way for any non-goblin to enter the large Goblin Collider is to sneak in, goblin style. However, if they do succeed in sneaking inside, then it will be assumed that they are meant to be there. The sneakiness itself is sufficient passport and proof of goblinish intent. This place is essentially the Goblin Pentagon mixed with a mad scientist lab powered by crushed up goblins shot through tubes at supersonic speeds. There are other aspects, like the mega weapon development for if the apocalypse wasps ever emerge from their giant peaches again, which I realize is an insane sentence, but I will cover it later. Not to mention, those mega weapons may have other purposes, but the goblins also just love the idea of having a doomsday device to play with. Anyway, if we talk about goblins, we also have to talk about their opposite and sworn enemy, the Anti-Goblin Empire. The Anti-Goblins are these weird, big red ogre baby things that wear cloaks and large cylindrical culturally important hats. They aren't very mobile, but are incredibly strong and use tongs to pick things up. These tongs are about the length of a person, and the anti-goblins are strong enough to pick somebody up and crush their skull with them. Anti-goblins want to stay as absolutely far away from regular goblins, and the tongs are their last line of defense, since if a goblin and an anti-goblin come too close together, they will literally explode, creating a small supernova that explodes in a 5-meter radius. They live in complete fear of ever coming across a goblin, and so have many people do their work for them, which is great for adventurers just as long as they take care to not insult any gaudy anti-goblin hats. Though the Anti-Goblin Empire is one of the locations in this world, I am not going to cover it too much. I think it requires less explanation and to me is less interesting than some of the other locations. Their entire existence is essentially to hate goblins and sell these gravity-defying pears they call sky apples that are favored by other groups in the Moonlands. They are a pretty horrific group of people, and the label Empire is fitting, considering the massive amount of slaves and plantations that they have, along with their secret police forces and general lack of empathy or care for people. Probably one of the more interesting aspects of their whole culture is their capital, Azure City, a place where everything is as square and as blue as can be, designed to be as calming and logical as possible. It's also guarded by the Malakaj Kudroj, the joke police, to essentially be as absurdist as possible with their jokes and performances to suss out any sneaky goblins who stand no chance in the face of such absurdity. I'm going to move through the outer regions before digging down into the heavily populated areas, since those tend to have much higher concept premises mixed with several factions. The Vermillion Sea in the southwest, however, isn't exactly simple either. The sea is completely made of translucent roots and stems of upside-down red poppies, creating a sea of strange, gelatinous-looking surfaces with a menacing red underneath. The only creature that lives here permanently are the Invisibeetles, a group of translucent isopod men who make castles and homes out of the coagulated poppy roots. Their homes may be invisible, but so are they, so privacy doesn't really matter. Besides, it's not like any other intelligent creatures call this place home. Their main predator are these demonic pteranodons that breach the poppies and fly through the air like it were water. This is probably a good time to explain that in a way, the sea isn't really a sea, even if it acts like one in some ways. If you fall out of a boat, you will be torn underneath the surface like a battered sailor, and those who have been saved here choked out tales of a red sky overlooking a red world. This may be hard to describe, but essentially, in the same way that the red sun world beneath the surface of the Vermillion Sea is the ocean to the Moonlands, it is believed that to the inhabitants of that world, the blue sky and inhabitants of the Moonlands is the ocean to them. The reason why this is relevant is, other than what I mentioned earlier about this being where the goblins came from and their crazy little crafts, this is also where the most vile and hated creatures come from, the apocalypse wasps. Long ago, soon after the goblins arrived in their large numbers, a massive 100-foot tall peach smashed through the Vermillion Sea, unfurling purple sails, and head forth to wreak havoc and destruction, killing all in its sugary path. The lucky ones were crushed or killed in battle. The unlucky ones were snatched up by the wasps and taken into the peach to be turned into apocalypse wasps themselves. They were able to be stopped by the entire Moonlands coming together to fight side by side against this near indestructible enemy. A group of heroes ventured into the Peach, fighting a nasty tunnel war, and finally damaging it enough to be blasted apart by a goblin superweapon. Since that event, there have been 11 more Apocalypse Wasp invasions of varying success, and the people of the Moonlands are always afraid of when the next one will come. 7 of the Peach Pits have been recovered and placed in a star fort for the research and safekeeping that is under the strictest security. Only those with strong mental fortitudes are allowed anywhere near these demonic artifacts, still heavily laden with chaos energy that can melt and control the minds of the weak. There are still apocalypse wasps who roam in small gangs, terrorizing and injecting their eggs into people to grow their numbers, and large bounties are placed for any wasp wings recovered. It is still unclear why they come through here, and if it is the goblins who came through first that put the wheels into motion for the apocalypse wasps to begin their invasions. If they are the reason, none of them are willing to confirm it. In the south, a faunophobic forest squats that nobody seems to have any memory entering, but many remember leaving. People have been found running out of the woods, not remembering anything but taken by a strange spirit of adventure to get as far away from the Umber Woods as possible, and struck with a deep fear of beetles. Waves of silence flow out from the woods, and while entering the woods, travelers will find the silences more supernatural than just the dead sounds of a forest. At first, a dull paranoia creeps into your mind, but the further you go in, the harder it is to even scream or chat, and the weight of the silence crushes you to the point of not even being able to whisper. These silences are despised by the goblins of the large Goblin Collider to the north, who set up garage bands, noise machines, raging engines, and all sorts of contraptions to drive the silence back. The border spaces between the Umber Woods and the noise patrols of the large Goblin Collider are truly a no man's land of damaged sound. So what is going on in this heavily foliaged forest? Well, the cousins of the Invisibeetles of the Vermillion Sea live here. The Penum beetles are a species of psychic giant beetles that have an entirely unique culture based on reason, nihilism, and silence. With all the craziness and complete lack of logic that they perceive the rest of the Moonlands to have, their goals are not completely known, but it is believed that they try to keep the Umber Woods as calm as possible in opposition to the manic continent it resides in. They do this in a few ways. The first being the radial ruins they build that tap into the nothingness and emptiness to power the infamous silence of the Umber Woods and spread across the Moonlands to keep the entire realm in check as much as possible, despite its want to fracture and twist further into madness. In their parliament of thoughts, to what degree this purpose needs to be upheld is in constant debate, as they are the ones who fly into the minds of interlopers and alter them to make them fear the Umber Woods or follow a new goal that will take them as far away from here as possible. They also are known to even murder those who make too many noises in their land or are considered too much of a threat to the ecosystem both physically and culturally. They are fascinating creatures that are very in tune with the forest itself as masterful gardeners and apiarists, as well as builders, not just of the radial ruins, but of greenhouses and other structures to further their agricultural needs. Outside those aspects, the Umber Forest is a fairly straightforward fantasy forest with its own weird brand of trolls, wildlife, and plants. So let's move on to where the Penum beetles were thought to have migrated from. This is probably a good time to bring up that this map is a bit deceptive. Though as accurate as can be from an audience standpoint of knowing where regions are located, it's good to remember that some of these places, such as the plains we are about to cover, actually go on far beyond what is charted or generally known. So the maps may make these areas look like smaller, easily traversable lands, but that is not the case, and the plains of Anaesthetic fire may be the most dangerous to journey across. A blackened land ruled by an invisible fire that you cannot feel, with the only respite being perfect verdant plots of land run by goblins. The Asbestos Bedouin, travelers on the back of large, skittering lizards, say that this is because even the fire doesn't want the goblins. The fire moves, grows, and collapses and regrows across the plain, and it is one of the most dangerous aspects of the Moonlands. It is still unknown if it's a sentient creature or a natural or supernatural feature, but regardless, it will burn you alive either way, and you won't even know it has you until you smell your own eyeballs melting and your skin getting a nice sear. Perceptive individuals may get lucky and notice it coming by the subtle heat haze that appears off in the distance before it reaches them. For most, however, it is strongly advised you stick to the magnesium-lined paths and keep eyes out for any animals, as they seem to sense the fire far before you ever will. The Asbestos Bedouin travel across these lands, their name coming from the robes they wear made from the asbestos clams of the Incoherent Isles, which we'll get to once you're ready for that. These robes aren't just protectors against the flame, but cultural hand-me-downs that signify their acceptance by their fellow Bedouin and the free life they live on the hostile plains, servants and vassals to nobody but themselves. They ride clinker skippers, massive lizards that even when sleeping shift and twitch, the fear of the ever-falling fire never leaving them completely. Though most Asbestos Bedouin tend to handle bows, many are known to wield green steel muskets made by goblin hands. Terrifying weapons both for wielders and victims of them, considering they are as deadly as they are unpredictably explosive. These are one of my favorite weapons I have seen in a while in a tabletop RPG setting. The gun fires a tiny, curled-up goblin sculpture that, when embedded in flesh, expands and wreaks havoc. Just an absolutely chaotic and fun weapon that makes any combat it is involved in infinitely more terrifying. Outside of the Asbestos Bedouins, there are also several different cults of ignition pilgrims. Within these cults reside different factions who have different beliefs and goals when it comes to either controlling, understanding, or destroying the prominent flame. Some can be incredibly helpful to travelers, but just as many should be avoided. The only place of respite, as much as that word can be used in this situation, can be found in the circular, flameless abodes of goblin communities who can be just as unpredictable and terrifying as the oncoming unseen inferno. Getting a break from being worried about the fire is nice, however you may be subjected to strange government systems and politics that you find yourself in the middle of. Imagine barely escaping a crispy death just to find yourself in the clutches of ravenous, glue-sniffing goblins who challenge you to a breakdancing competition just for the chance to have a cot to sleep on after 3 days of non-stop travel. As silly as this can get, I do think there's a lot of potential for fun encounters here, such as the Goblin encampment having a system of government based on theater, and currently its upheaval as the behind-the-scenes crew are on strike demanding fairer wages and better working conditions from the actor elite, causing essentially a government shutdown, as just one example of the weird settlements you could find or come up with. There are more details with the plane of Anaesthetic fire, but I think that covers the broad aspects and factions you'll deal with. One of the harder to traverse locations in the Moonlands, the northerly located Whetstone Ridge is full of dangers both natural and supernatural. A seemingly never-ending region of deep ravines and tall ridges, only the most athletic and vertigo-immune can survive here. The population that resides in the Whetstone Ridge build atop themselves above the dangerous valleys below, but staying clear of the mountain peaks that rise above them. For on these peaks, meditating demons from a past glacial age squat here, encrusted in ice. Occasionally, some fools try to research, excavate, or attempt to commune with these demons of hyper-blue ice, but they usually die from the cold before they can, or are cut down by the crazed thanes who rule the ridge. It is believed that one day, these demons will awaken, but much like a dormant volcano or a phone call from your dad, it will probably not happen in your lifetime. The people that live here have strange customs like most of the groups in the Moonlands. Their main source of pride are their uncontrollable and oversized bristly pigs and their magical apples. Instead of outright war amongst the different groups here, a sort of proxy war of espionage, theft, destruction, and other skullduggery takes place in the magic apple industry. Adventurers looking to make some good coin should look at a career in apple security. Ruling these different groups are crazed thanes, exiles of Owl City back when it was Moon City, before they were cast out by the Mystery Masons. While the crazed thanes are illogical and insane as they come, the Mystery Masons worship reason above all else, and I realize I am throwing a lot of terms at you, but we'll cover them later, trust me. The crazed thanes are merely tolerated here for a few reasons. Considering how insane they are, their subjects actually have a decent amount of autonomy and are left overall unbothered by their overlords. Perhaps to the larger reason they are useful to the people here is due to their effectiveness against the ontomorphic manticores, a species of highly intelligent manticore cursed with only the ability to eat those who answer incorrectly to the ridiculous questions they pose to their prey. They can still kill those who answer correctly, however, so don't get too cocky if you know the answer. Coming across one of these fickle bastards probably won't end well for you regardless of your knowledge, so be prepared for a fight or a flight to the ravine below if you encounter a manticore. And this is where the crazed thanes come in. When manticores threaten their duchy, they are expected to meet it and completely baffle it by answering its question with an incomprehensible and insane answer, buying the thane time to cut down in its confusion. There are several other monsters that call the ridge their home that are as creative as you can expect from Patrick Stuart, as well as some more interesting aspects about the cultures that reside here, but we're going to move on to the next region now. The Painted Plain is probably my favorite location in the Moonlands. I love that it's the breadbasket of the entire region, and the premise it has I think gives game masters just an endless amount of visual media to draw from as inspiration for quest ideas, monsters, and environments. I realize it may be weird to love something for being the agricultural food source of a fantasy world, but I find the grounding elements found throughout the book like this are what keep this strange region feeling like an actual place that can be adventured in, and not just a completely untethered thought experiment. The Painted Plain is a beautiful land that has a horror in a way not dissimilar to Midsummer's bright aesthetics hiding a darkness beneath. Everything is painted, bright and beautiful. There is no light, the brightness is an illusion, it is just pure color. Even the sun is just a yellow circle in the sky, casting no light upon the ground below. There is no focus or depth, so telescopes and lenses have no effect. The beauty is also haunting and numbing. Everywhere you look is perfect and gorgeous. Without contrast, this can lead people to become detached and numb, or crazed in pursuit of even greater beauty and perfection they'll never achieve. In this land, you'll find all kinds of creatures in varying art styles, from cel-shaded animals straight from a video game to monsters inspired by a painter's nightmare. The factions in the Painted Plain are ridiculous, but really fun and thematic. The natives of this land are known as the cleverly named Picts, and they are divided into two categories, Dexter and Sinister. Picts do not care about gender, race, or other dividing lines that regular human societies wrestle with. Instead, they discriminate based on art style and whether one is left-handed or right-handed. Dexters tend to be more classical and often are known for oil paintings, watercolors, and more traditional styles. Sinisters prefer partaking in surrealist, modernist, and avant-garde styles. Both factions are in a beleaguered political war with each other over the superior style. They debate, scheme, and organize in two giant stone hands, the Dexters living in the right hand, the Sinisters in the left. They refer to these hands as the Master Mason hands, as it is not completely clear, but it is believed that the elusive Master Masons created the painted plane, the Picts, and these hands. But like most facts in the Moonland, this is heavily debated, and many believe the Picts themselves long ago built them. Either way, what remains now is a strange social hierarchy in a never-ending battle for supremacy. Most of these people will also never leave the painted plane, especially for the more surrealist types who may die or even cease to exist entirely if they travel outside of its borders. More traditional and realistic Picts may be able to survive, but there will almost always be a part of them that remains painted, like weird anime eyes, or a strangely textured arm. Despite the extensive picturesque beauty and surface-level utopian aesthetics the painted plane has, it also has its fair share of monsters. There are several that can be found, but the one I want to focus on are Tears. Tears are born of the plains and are a space of anti-reality, a corrupted monster that are one of the largest threats to the land and come in a variety of types with a scary amount of potential abilities. These Tears are one of the main reasons why adventurers are not only tolerated but welcomed here, despite the intolerance Picts have for outsiders, since they can more easily deal with the Tears than the Picts can. While still putting themselves in danger, the chances of them facing complete oblivion at the hands of a malevolent flying turpentine can are much lower for a foreign adventurer. The last aspect in the same vein of adventuring I want to touch on are the so-called utopian ruins found here. Villages and ruined towns based around big white modernist blocks, islands of darkness, reality, and entropy. The only place in the plane untouched by the paint apocalypse, the ruins are products of the pre-paint Mason culture. Deep within and beneath are dark dungeons walled in white stone, ruined by the civilizational collapse and time locked so that they cannot be permanently repaired. Here, there is actual, real dark, one of the only places on the plane where a lantern might actually be useful. Color leaks in and stains the walls, but always dries to umber cake and flakes to nothing. Picts visiting the ruins can flake and brown away. Outsiders are needed to explore and penetrate the depths in search of secrets, conceptual weapons, and time-looped archaeotech capable of killing alpha Tears. The ruins are occupied by bandits, blurs, Tears, surreals, and temporary Civil War losers. These are obviously the setup for any dungeoneering you may want to do. The contrast between bright horror to a more familiar, dank gloom may be a weirdly nice reprieve for characters. Outside, of course, of whatever unimaginable horrors and ancient weapons they may stumble upon down there. Between the political intrigue, monsters, locations, and industries, an outsider could live quite well from a life of adventuring here. However, they will more than likely be irreparably changed, leaving not quite the person they entered as. The oldest location found in the Moonlands, the Maw is an endlessly dark abyss ringed by glass towers, transparent teeth gating the black hole. The amazingly named Invisible City of Visible Grief wraps around it, its streets cut with a neon buffeting wind from the Maw, making the stone buildings invisible, allowing general sight into them, like a video game that hasn't fully loaded in yet. The Maw is incredibly dangerous even outside of the Kind Gales, with pairs of Vanta black geese symbiotically hunting their prey alongside strangling black oozes that use the glittering treasure of their last victims to fool and lure new ones to their demise. Despite the horrid conditions and depressing atmosphere, there is still somehow a tiny population of mostly artists and criminals here. These invisible people, changed by their surroundings, live their life the best they can in these ruins, creating and consuming invisible art and knowledge. Along with them are the opal-winged batmen who fly down from their spires ringing the Maw to smoke cigars and hang out in invisible saloons with the artist class, and the other group that live here, the mole men. The mole men are the working class of the society, who work their due and pass the time enraging themselves by reading braille tabloids. Like most of the Moonlands, this is a strange existence, and it's no wonder not many people come here to stay. The Bat people claim that the Maw takes you to other worlds, whether that be the Dreamlands or somewhere else. It is not agreed upon, but they do claim to have come from whatever lies beyond the Maw. Adventurers in need of employment may find something here despite the small population, as there is always work that needs to be done, especially in a place as hostile as this. But it's another conversation entirely if the jobs that can be found here are worth the pay. The Incoherent Isles are probably the most high concept and strange region found in this realm, which is saying a lot. I left it as one of the last ones for this exact reason. I'll let Stuart's words sell the concept better than I can. Bordering on the reach close to the city are the Incoherent Isles. The isles are blurred, as if by distance, and will not resolve their form. Nothing comes into focus, seeming always as if perceived through an old man's eyes. For those raised outside the isles, being there is a little like being old or being blind, frightening and indistinct. They are colder than surrounding lands. The ocean of the isles grows wider and deeper the further within one goes. It can be circled in a few days, but to cross across its center would take infinite time. Those few who have penetrated deep into the isles and returned alive say that in time, the sea becomes a flat plain, perfectly mirroring the cloudless, unblurred stars, refusing even a ripple. The temperature sinks below freezing, but the ocean remains liquid, supercooled. Those who fall in are dead in a second, pulled out a moment later as solid as a lollipop, while the wake of their death spreads endlessly from the scene like an infinite shadow of kinetic time, sinking into nothing. The people of the Isles are absolutely fascinating. Visual identity counts for nothing in a blurred world, therefore people here sing or hum their own song all the time, or risk literally fading away forever. The different isles move and blur together, merging their wildlife, geography, identity, and populations, creating a new personality, holding on to the traits of their past identities within their new ones, and similarly, when these masses break apart, these new, smaller islands hold concentrated aspects of what has been divided. These people also have the ability to blur even into the objects around them at varying levels of mastery, some only being good enough to merge with the bush nearby to hide, while others can merge and move through different objects, traversing easily across massive distances. There is quite a bit more to this, but I'm trying to keep this somewhat simplified. As you can tell, with people this complex, you could probably guess their culture would be equally so, and you'd be right. Individuals aren't really a thing here. At least not in the way that humans view it, and this can lead to a complicated series of developments. The tribespeople of the Incoherent Isles end up merging with their local environment and can be held responsible for both benevolent and malevolent actions or inactions of objects that have become part of their personality. Such as the tree in your yard falling on someone, your house welcoming in a cold stranger, or maybe you're stupid enough to keep a collection of knives that belong to a murderer around. This is the toughest place in the book to talk about because I think it really benefits from being read in the words of Stuart's exact kind of eccentricity explaining it. I find they really capture the weirdness of this place that still seems to function despite being so brutally alien. Running any kind of adventure here would be a worthy challenge for both game masters and a group trying to set the atmosphere while not making it completely incomprehensible. There is a decent amount to do here, whether it's the foolhardy and impossible task of trying to map and explore this place for someone, dealing with the politics of two new tribes split off from one, trading, or collecting some of the resources created here that are sought after heavily, and so many more things. Like everywhere else, there are also the unique monsters laid out here, such as the blurred orcas, which gave me a weird sense of thalassophobia, as the idea of these hard-to-pinpoint giant creatures gliding underneath the glassy, still sea is eerie for a reason that I can't quite put into words. There is a kind of cold horror that overlays the entirety of the Incoherent Isles, a maddened voyage into an Arctic world that you may never escape from. Strangely, for as devoid of life as this place can be, I think if running a game here, strong personalities is what you would need to really bring it to life. Game masters should run crew members of whatever ship the player is on with a real dynamism that will help sell the insanity of exploring this place through humor, terror, and anger expressed with these travelers and sailors. Also, the uneasiness players could experience from something like meeting a proud tribe that is helpful, only to meet them again later to find a divided slice that holds arrogance and ego, no longer anchored by milder, friendlier traits they once had, and how to deal and reckon with that. For more nuance and details on this region, I recommend grabbing the book, because even for outsiders, staying here too long can have its consequences, so we're moving on. Narcisollis is one of the coolest cities I have read in a long time. Its name is not subtle for the themes of the city. A gaudy, self-absorbed, and petty people reside here and are incredibly proud of that fact. A city that looks like it is in constant cosplay with even the least wealthy people in crazy, colorful attire with as painterly of makeup that they can wear. You'll find any person here from across the Moonlands, from goblins to bat people to asbestos Bedouin, and many more. The buildings here incorporate every possible architecture you can conceive, and many more you can't, all stacked on top of each other, clashing in various styles. You'll have buildings straight out of Bloodborne next to gigantic Barbie playhouses across from a bedazzled hobbit hole. But here's the thing. The city isn't real. All of this is a defense mechanism created to keep the city alive. The city exists only so long as people believe and remember it exists. The city wants to bring you in, keep you there, and suck the very marrow of who you are out of your bones and discard you like trash. The themes are properly unsubtle, and Narcisollis is a perfect place for more tongue-in-cheek, satirical, or even straight-up comedic or dark adventures and campaigns. Everybody wants to be remembered, everybody's trying to be unique, and many do it in ways that have many parallels with the entertainment industry. You have more traditional historic orators about the importance of their house, comedic tour guides keeping your attention on a subject about the city with jokes just corny enough to be charming, gossiping crowds talking about the latest dueling architecture endeavors, and tons of people vying for your attention through various stories about themselves and their property. An incredibly welcoming community, the veneer fades away as you have less and less to offer the more of your personality is taken for the city to spin in its own way, taking a life of its own. The city has crime just like any other, however there are some extraordinarily strange ones, such as true crime and ghost tours in the cover of night, spreading rumors and creating belief in dark ideas that can become reality. Probably the most over-the-top evil that can be found here are the artistic serial killers who are allowed to more easily escape from the police as long as their kills are creative or cruel enough to help be memorable. Besides, nothing quite captures attention like a killer still on the loose who seems to take pleasure in trying to be the Banksy of murderers. This video is already long enough, so I'm not even going to get into the lord who runs the city, both being incredibly powerful and completely imaginary, or talk about mind holes. You could take from both media and inspiration straight up from just entertainment industries and make it feel like the party has just walked in on some grand Hollywood ball with the most insufferable and fake people taking an interest in them. It could even be fun for a shorter campaign if the players themselves are some kind of influencers who are trying to make it big here, and are a perfect fit for this bright den of vipers. And so we arrive finally at our last location, and this one is extra silly. Important to the lore of these lands while still being as vague and as open as most of the lore is, this was once a capital seat of these lands, now it just sits as a pile of ruins for goblin hovels and criminal birds. I won't get too into the lore since there isn't that much to say other than to explain that the master masons that have been brought up here and there throughout this video met their end here. People who followed tenets of reason, law, and logic who came here when this was ruled by the insane lunar aristocracy, pushing them to the Whetstone Ridge where they now rule as insane thanes, until some catastrophe involving the painted plane caused the masons to fall and be lost to history. Honestly, Owl City is basically just completely insane and dangerous, so I'm going to do a lightning round of things you can find here. Firstly, the criminal bird aspect is weirdly compelling. The Owl City crows who can change their size at will to be as large as a person or as small as a rodent primarily exist in areas called crow zones, where they'll take anything they can from you, whether it be rations or your prosthetic leg. These highly intelligent creatures are even known to trick people by putting up signs that say, "No crow zones," or drawing arrows pointing to safety. We also have gull gangs, made up of ugly, stupid birds who will attack anyone they deem weak enough to take on. Because of this attitude, they are in a constant war with the literal children of Owl City, a bloody war of attrition with no end in sight as casualties stack up on both sides. There are also stool pigeons, cowardly narcs who will find suitable prey and lead muggers, crows, and other predators straight to the victims and scavenge what remains after. Seemingly, the only useful birds are owls, and it is highly recommended you carry one at all times for protection to ward away would-be thieves, murderers, and harassing birds trying to bully you for your lunch money. There's also the Great Goblin Market, a day market where everyone across the Moonlands comes to trade supplies from painted plain food, incoherent isle crafts, to dangerous goblin contraptions. Outside of that, there are several more quirks and habits of the people here, and various factions you may have the misfortune of meeting, especially the penny farthing gangs. Goblins have learned to attach very basic petrol engines to penny farthing bicycles. The engines don't do much other than produce smoke and extra noise, and to sometimes explode the bike. Goblin technology is not that good. The bikes do not have brakes. Goblins supercharge their penny farthings with rare chemicals and have extensive competitions and arguments about the best engine and the best adaptations. Bikers lounge around with their sleeves rolled up smoking slender clay pipes. It's not clear if they know or care that the engines don't work, or even if the engines are meant to be working to power the bike. The interpretation that the engine should be powering the bike may be a purely human construct. It may simply be enough for the goblins that the engine be engine. Bikers make a living dealing and delivering drugs and through various other crimes. They feud for street control and run regular midnight races in which penny farthings dash down narrow roads a quarter mile at a time. They often die through being hit in the face by a great horned owl at high speed in the dark. There's also the Necropolis of Glass, the towering pyramids that serve as tombs for previous illusory lords of Narcisollis. This serves as an impossibly dangerous dungeon for characters to get rich from, with rumors of diamonds, magical artifacts, and valuable knowledge of the illusory lords enough to make anyone rich. However, the Necropolis is filled to the brim with strange traps and even stranger creatures guarding its streets. Just some of the encounters you have here are guillotine guys, men made of eternally falling guillotine blades, saline golems who read like they were made for a very specific kind of fetish, and shatter traps, the most common trap found here that attempt to stick you in a mirror and then tip over to shatter with you inside. Between Owl City, the Great Goblin Market, and the Necropolis, I think this location, albeit wacky and over the top like most of these regions, is probably the most traditional kind of game you could have. You have the malevolent city and chaotic market full of job opportunities, faction play, and items that can be gathered, and then you have the unique mega dungeon to explore and return to. Keep in mind, as this is a setting book, the dungeon is not laid out at all, but I think it wouldn't be hard to put the extra effort in to make this dungeon your own. Especially considering the insanity of these being tombs for lords, I must remind you that literally don't exist, but also kind of do. What players could find in here could be so different from table to table. Hell, you could probably just slot in the dungeon part of Deep Carbon Observatory in one part and just run that. The world of Gackling Moon can be over the top or straight up too abstract in parts to fully get your head around, so I want to reserve this section to give some advice on what I would do if you're intrigued enough to run a campaign here, but also find that task daunting. Every section is pretty short and leaves a lot open to interpretation. The broad ideas do a proper job of selling the absurdist but dark tone of the specific locations, and having more than enough written content on top of tables for every region, but the fine details, hell, even the coarse details, are left for you to fill in. You're gonna have to set expectations and also drip feed this world slowly to your players because there is so much going on here, you do not want to overwhelm them or yourself trying to keep this coherent. So this is all advice to make your life easier, not what I think is the only way to run games here. Firstly, I'd make the players visitors, not natives, so that the characters can be as clueless as the players in terms of world knowledge, because there is way too much craziness to throw on characters in session 1 of what they should know about this world. Have them come through a portal, the Great Goblin Collider. Maybe they could even be a party of goblins coming up from the Red Hell world and arriving in one of those submarine contraptions. I also recommend setting it where there will be a decent amount of RP to action ratio. You want there to be people who can help explain and also sell the themes of your campaign, as well as being able to use exploration, combat, and wilderness to work alongside them. If you want a more survivally campaign, the Whetstone Ridge has plenty of opportunities between predatory creatures, mountain climbing, and extreme temperature changes. For a more roleplay heavy and vibrant campaign to really push yourself to find different painterly and cinematic ways of describing people, places, and things, you have the Painted Plain, which still has its fair share of dungeons and special monsters for more physical threats, and maybe if you want to do some sort of anti-colonial or anti-imperial kind of campaign, you also have the Anti-Goblin Empire, where you could deal with burning down plantations, resistance fighters, all kinds of stuff like that that could be a very fun sort of campaign of both chaos, destruction, politics, intrigue, and extremely dangerous combatants to come up against. With how crazy everything is, it is also smart to ground your stories and emergent narratives into simple ideas. Getting around the large Goblin Collider dealing with goblin scientific madness, reality-bending warps, and geometry that makes no sense doesn't need you trying to create a story that is attempting to meet it where it's at in terms of complexity, or more likely, convolution. The unhinged ideas your players will come up with mixed with the world around them making no sense will make the story as weird as you need it to be. But players in the story itself need that through line, that anchor to chomp down on, so that they don't get so lost in the sauce that they can't keep up with what is happening, or even worse, become bored due to checking out once it becomes clear that everything is weird for the sake of weird. And you shouldn't have that problem overall. Everybody may be living in a crazy world, but there are aspects anybody can recognize, and that is what keeps it real and keeps people actually caring about an insane reality. Basically, every region has something to trade, creatures to fear, interpersonal and cultural goals, issues and values, and not just a soupy limbo of manic nouns and overly quirky concepts. It may feel when running worlds like this that your ideas aren't living up to the creativity found in here, and that can be an awful feeling. But for memorable and fun encounters, you don't need to go completely off the deep end. Your players may have been stopped by 1,000 bandits and forests, but a little twist on that tire trope and suddenly you have a group of tears who move like a melting Dali painting, demanding to suck the pigment from the player's skin, and I doubt that will be a memory they will soon forget. This was less of a review than it was just going in depth on a good chunk of what can be found in here. I found this world so fascinating. Patrick Stewart's writing made me laugh, and I also think about how I'd use this world. Tom K. Kemp's art is incredibly evocative, unique, and some even disturbing like this one that may or may not be a Goatsy reference, and Scrap Princess created some content in here I didn't even touch on, and I'll leave that for you to discover yourself. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this weird delve into the Moonlands. If you want to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon. Patrons get a video a day early, access to occasional video polls, and more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good one, and stay safe out there.